Okay, so we'll see how this turns out, because it's been a hot fucking minute since I've recorded a video outside, and I didn't live in the city at the time, but we'll see. So I mentioned in my last video that I've been reading the Bhagavad Gita. I need to work on my Sanskrit pronunciation, but I've been reading Hindu texts lately because I've never been, I was raised religious, I was raised Christian, but I was never in my apostasy or apostasy, I still don't know how to pronounce it, in that phase of my life. I never went through the super polar opposite where you're like, oh, fuck religion, I identify positively as an atheist and whatever. It was just kind of an absence of belief, and I maintain a gratefulness that, I have the knowledge that I have, because if I didn't think that my eternal fate was staked on my studying this text, I probably wouldn't have studied it as in depth as I did. However, Jesus Christ, I hope I'm not covering the mic. However, I will say that I've always had a lot of respect for Amish people in regards to Christian sects, because Amish people are otherwise known as Anabaptists, which means don't baptize. More specifically, they don't baptize until you're an adult, which is why you have Rumspringa, because it ties into the belief of the age of accountability and who is really qualified to make a decision for what their belief is going to be. You can be raised in something, but your family can't choose what you believe at the end of the day, especially once you become an adult. So it doesn't work out extremely well, because the comparative time that they get is, 18 years under this religious teaching versus it's an undetermined amount of time that they spend on Rumspringa. But, best case scenario, you get a couple of years up against 18. And then there's also the added societal pressure of well, if you leave, they're going to shun you. So it's not 100% a free choice, but it's better than a lot of sects offer you. So anyway, that was very much in line with my thinking too when I was a Christian. I went through confirmation class when I was 13, like a lot of us had to at my church, and I enjoyed the class. I studied, I was studious, but at the end of it, it's your matriculation from the class is your baptism, and I wasn't ready yet because I wasn't sure. Even though it was what I had been raised with, I didn't want to commit before, it just felt like a really big decision. And then by the time I did, it was really personal, because I was raised Methodist, and I had learned more about what baptism is supposed to be symbolic of. And Methodists don't submerge fully, they do sprinkling, which I felt was not sufficient to represent what baptism is supposed to represent. So I had my whole congregation mob it out to the lake in town, because again, Methodists don't have submersion tanks in their churches because we don't do full submersion, but that's what I wanted. So I brought everybody out there with me, because that's the type of bitch I am. That being said, it's a little bit of a tangent, but I have had trauma related to my religious upbringing, to be sure. There's a lot of really harmful ideas that I had to come out of, especially as a woman, and I did not have anybody pointing me in that direction. I just kind of had to figure it out, and not out of a vacuum, I was coming from people actively pointing me in the wrong direction. So while I am not one of those people advocating for the complete stamping out of religion, I have strong feelings about the way that it's taught to children, because I was a child who was taught really harmful ideas. However, I've been, I had like a 5-year period really of not giving a shit about it one way or another and being pretty apathetic to religion. Once I finally was able to, once my belief kind of dissipated, and now I'm taking more of a look into it, not in any way, shape, or form like it used to be, but I'm recognizing more utility in it than I had previously seen. And I am becoming one of those people that I always kind of made fun of when I was super Christian, that like spirituality is appealing to me without the whole organized religious aspect of it. Texts are a big part of that. Even if you're not religious, I can't do finger quotes because I'm holding a water bottle. Even if you're not religious, if you want to get into spirituality, you need to read religious texts. I personally think that. Whatever your brand may be. Or at least they're a really good supplement to that kind of exploration. So I've been looking into Hindu texts, which I'm really a big fan of because there's so much. And I love the feeling of being just slightly over my head, because that's where the learning happens. Not complete overwhelming, but just where you can, the waves keep hitting you in the face and you can barely catch your breath. You will eventually catch your breath, and that's when you start to understand something, which is, that kind of challenge is important to maintain in your life. So that being said, I've been reading texts and I've been attending temple, because I don't think with something that has so much historical significance, I don't feel qualified to lead my own study. And ritual is such a big part of any religion, that especially something that is so foreign to me as Hinduism, like I can't just go to temple and play Simon Says and get anything out of it. And I can't just read the text at home and try to contextualize it myself and get out of it what the authors intended, I think. It has to be, they're interdependent. So I went recently to, like a month or so ago, I went to Gayatri Yagna, which is a ritual to give thanks to the goddess Gayatri, which is, she is the amalgam of Shiva, Ganesh, and there's a third one, and I can't remember what it is right now. I would Google, but I did not do that ahead of time. Apologies. But 3 gods, and it depends on what sect of Hinduism you follow, but a lot of people see her as like the supreme goddess. And so this is like a 2-hour ceremony. We are giving offerings and pujas, which are prayers, and repeating mantras to this goddess. And all of it was in Hindi, which I do not speak. So that wasn't something I was prepared for. I should have been, but I wasn't. It was after like 2 attendances at the temple, and there's a word for a Hindu priest, but it's again something that I have forgotten because I'm new to this. They both spoke English. There's two men running the temple, and they were also leading the yagna. So they spoke English to me at the time when I came, because they knew that I speak English. But when they're leading this whole ceremony, and I'm the only white person, and there's like 200-300 Indian people there, obviously it was in Hindi. However, I was approached by this girl, Rujuta, who was very sweet, and her brother, whose name I don't remember because he didn't add me on social media. And they had me sit down with them and helped me, they helped lead me through it and told me what to do and translate it for me so that I could understand. And it really got my attention from my perspective as someone who grew up in the church, because I've gone to temple a couple times, as I said, and there's usually like a couple of children there with the families, like 5 to 8 year olds who run around and are just kind of having a good time and obviously don't really understand the full significance of what's going on. And the priest will give you a blessed apple at the end of your visit to the temple or at the end of the yagna, and it's just these kids running around eating their apples. They probably just feel like they're just having fun eating their apples, just the same way that I felt when I was 8 years old getting dragged to church with my family. I wasn't going because of my dedication to God. I was going because that's what you do on Sunday. But there is a point somewhere where it changes. For me, it was when I was 13, and I began to understand the significance of this belief applied personally, and how I have to take up my own, like the onus is on me to apply it to my own life. You learn that you have a life that is somewhat under your control, and that includes your beliefs. And you start to take responsibility for them. And so I'm sitting next to this girl who is my age, and we're offering up pujas with this card that has a bunch of squares on it, and on each square is a different god. It's not all of the gods, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's all of the gods that we're offering pujas to. And there's you put rice, you dip it in certain colorants for various gods, and you add petals to it. And she's like, oh, this is the god of Saturday, oh, this is the god of Thursday, this is the god of the moon, this is the god of the sun, as we do each one. And I'm just thinking about and when I showed up too, she asked me what I knew about it, and I said I had felt like I had done a lot of research the preceding week, and I was like, well, this is the anniversary of the first time that the Gayatri mantra was uttered. It's also the anniversary of when Gayatri appeared on earth in the form of knowledge. And that Gayatri is these 3 gods, which I remembered at the time. And she kind of cut me off, and she was like, yeah, it's a lot. And it is a lot. Any religion is a lot. And it feels to me like, Hinduism has so many texts, but I grew up Christian, and there's 66 books in the Bible, and they're all different genres. There's the books outside the canon. They keep the canon very narrow for purposes of not preaching heresy, but there's a lot more text outside of that. There's the Apocrypha. There's the Talmud, which just dictates how these documents would be passed from the oral tradition into writing, and how to keep the writing consistent over generations and generations of being copied. And you don't, unless you're a rabbi, you're not memorizing most of this. And even rabbis don't memorize the New Testament. But there's an intimacy of knowledge that comes with being raised with something. And I'm comparing myself to this girl, not feeling bad that I don't know everything about Hinduism, or, I'm sure she wouldn't say she knows everything about it, but I'm not comparing our knowledge in a negative way, but it just really drew my attention to the idea of what culture is. And I kind of, as somebody who really values independence and autonomy, it bothered me. It still kind of bothers me to think of children being raised with religion before they're capable of thinking critically. But I've started to see more perspectives to that, because you can't be raised without a culture. You can't be raised with just nothing. There's no baseline that is interfering with. It's going to be something. And you can't necessarily, if you want to pass something on to your children, you can't wait until they become adults and have them get it the same way. And I study languages, and it's the same way with languages, where like you can study something as an adult, but you're not going to feel the meaning of the words the same as if you grew up with them. And it's like just the same as that I hate that I was raised religious in some ways, and in other ways I am grateful, because there's all these stories and all these like weird intricacies of the Bible that like I would not know if I was not raised with them as a child. And it kind of made me accept more that... Have I had this green tea stain on my face this entire time I've recorded? Culture is not something you're supposed to get a choice in. And it's just one of many things that like reminds you that yes, you're an individual, but you're also a part of something. And you don't have control over your role in it necessarily. You just have control over the way that you use it. And that's my thoughts on religion and culture right now. Thanks.